welcome to another episode of Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton. Here at a Seat at the Table, we thrive ourselves on ensuring that we make sure we invite decision makers to the table with resources that can meet the needs of our community, especially those communities that have oftentimes been left out, the underserved, the underrepresented, and typically undereducated. Our job, as we see it, is to make sure we link up decision makers with those in need. And so, without any further ado, we have State Representative from the 19th Legislative District, Representative Jake Wheatley, here with us out of Allegheny County.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We're going to have a robust conversation. We'll touch on a plethora of things regarding what's currently on the table during this state budget season. But one of the main things we wanted to talk about, which we'll end with, and we'll have another guest come on with us, which is Dr. Christian Anderson from Morgan State University. If we could bring him up. Welcome, Dr. Anderson. How you doing?
Good morning, Carl. How are you doing today?
All right. And we have Representative Jake Wheatley here as well. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with a conversation just talking in general about what's currently happening at the State House, what's at the forefront of the agenda, especially with it being budget season. And then we're going to end again, Dr. Anderson, we're going to end with the two of you discussing critical race theory, because we see that as a large push nationwide. And from my perspective, there's a miseducation and a misunderstanding of exactly what critical race theory is, what its intentions are. So we'd like to wrap up with that. So that's why we're bringing in Dr. Anderson as well to join in with our conversation. So Representative Wheatley, what's on the tab?
Well, first of all, you hit it right on the nail, right on the head with the budget season. Before the federal American Rescue Plan came together, we were faced with about $3 billion deficit. But since then, we've now had a $3 billion surplus plus $7 billion from the feds. So we don't have that crises that we thought we would have earlier, where we were going to have to figure out how we make $3 billion up. But we still have to figure out how we're going to spend that $10 billion. And as always, there's this conversation from one side of the aisle. They want to hold as much of it back to not have to make decisions around revenue. And the other, of course, I'm one of those who believe we need to put that money back on the streets, because there's a lot of people, a lot of businesses suffering from the pandemic that needs our additional support. But on top of that, while we're dealing with that critical financial conversation, the Republicans here in the state are joined with what they've been doing across the country. They're trying to limit our voting rights and suppress the vote after we've had historic turnouts that I think of Black and brown people across the country. They see the writing on the wall, and they want to limit those voices as much as they can. So we're dealing with that. House Bill 1300. Matter of fact, today, one of the reasons I have to rush away from here is a floor vote around House Bill 1300, which essentially will try to suppress the vote of many of our citizens, Black, brown, and others across the Commonwealth. So that's a critical issue this week. And then also we're dealing with some other things. For me, medical cannabis, we're trying to expand, our access point for medical cannabis. But as you know, I'm also a strong advocate for adult use cannabis. I think the time has come. We're seeing it across the country. The time has come for Pennsylvania to move into that direction. So we're trying to still work that. And again, had we not had that $7 billion from the federal coming in, we probably would be closer to trying to get adult use here. But those are the three hot things I think right now that's pressing in Harrisburg.
I'm sitting on. I also sit on. It's funny, not funny, but it's ironic that you bring up the medical cannabis adult uses and basically being able to tax it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I sit on the Governor's Transportation Revenue Options Council, and so on there we brought that up. Well, I did,
right.
In regards to bringing in revenues. They're talking about tolling bridges, et cetera. But I'm like, if there's a natural product out here that is just as natural as liquor,
right?
If right. Well, more so, we'll say.
Yeah.
And if we can tax that as a revenue stream, as opposed to tolling bridges or limited the amount of bridges we have to toll in order to address the infrastructure, I think that's a viable option.
Well, as you know, on that committee, they've probably talked about it. Next year, we're going to be faced with a $420 million hole for mass transit across the Commonwealth. And if we don't figure out the solution for not only mass transit, I remember back in 2003, Rendell did a study and it showed that we needed $3 to $4 billion of investment just to bring our infrastructure, our roads and bridges up to standard. That's 2003. If you fast forward to now, we're probably somewhere 5, 6, maybe even $7 billion just to get the standard, not to talk about what we need moving forward.
Right.
So the amount of revenues that are necessary for us to really meet our infrastructure needs, I think we need to be serious about it. And so when I say when the Republicans talk about not wanting to spend and invest money, they want to hold money for our baseline general funds. I think they're missing the boat about all of the needs that the citizens of Pennsylvania needs us to
rainy day,
about.
right?
Yeah, rainy day.
Newsflash, outside right now.
It's raining
right now.
Yeah, it's storming.
It's storming.
In some neighborhoods, it's been storming.
Right, exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
You know, and so that's what we talk about here at A Seat at the Table, is underserved neighborhoods, you know, and oftentimes uneducated, not in terms of, I'm talking about strategically uneducated on purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and so bringing you and Dr. Anderson, you know, in on conversations like this. Dr. Anderson, are you seeing anything down through, talking about funding and things down through the Maryland area, with you down in, now you're not speaking on behalf of the state as a whole, but you're also a parent, a taxpayer, and a black man in America who knows you're a black man in America. So are you seeing some of these same things, voter suppression and things down through there? Yeah, I'm sure you have something.
Not as much of voter suppression and revising a lot of the voter laws. I know a lot of the conversation has been really focused around economy and getting the state's economy restarted and jump started in this post-pandemic era.
Yeah.
I know our governor is limiting, cutting back state unemployment benefits and things of that nature, just allegedly to, you know, get folks back into the workforce, to jumpstart the workforce, things of that nature. But nothing as hot button issue as on the national stage with the voter rights and changes to voter rights. Gerrymandering and all that stuff has always been an issue. You know, whoever's in charge pretty much moves that. But luckily, Maryland, we have a Republican governor, but both houses of Congress are Democratic. So it's a good push and pull at the state level.
Clearly understand that. You guys were in the news, I guess last year or year before, where the state, the historically black colleges, in essence, won some allocation that were, you know, backlogged for a rainy day, I guess. Again, and I'm sure we face some of the similar challenges, inequity with regards to funding of our colleges, the University of Historically Black Colleges, Lincoln, Cheney, you know, here in those state associated colleges. When it comes to HBCUs, so
we won a 14. It was a 14-year case, and they finally got a settlement. And the 4 historically black colleges in Maryland, you know, which have been historically underfunded, have gotten, you know, some money, and now it's really up to the administrations of these institutions to go ahead and
that's, I mean,
well, I was going to say, you know, Pennsylvania went through a similar suit back in the early 80s. And actually, Lincoln and Cheney, that's one of the reasons why, and a lot of students don't know this, there was a federal lawsuit that we won, and a lot of the students at Lincoln and Cheney from that decision have access to be able to have their, if they go to med school, law school, or somewhere in Pennsylvania, graduate school in those areas, to have it paid for. But a lot of our students don't, one, know about it. Right. 2, is underutilized, so it's not promoted. But a lot of our students don't use it. And now the Governor Corbett, when he was there a couple years ago, he took the money away and redistributed the money. So that's one of the things that I think we have to be better at: advertising, marketing, and making sure our students are aware of the advantages.
And that's another. So we'll transition. I know you're a large component in terms of minority businesses, businesses. So we've come up and had, you know, legislative day, you know, at the Capitol and things. So you're no stranger to the Pennsylvania Diversity Coalition. So we're thankful for your advocacy on the Hill with that. I'm looking at the $7 to $10 billion surplus as a way to make sure, you know, that we truly have equity, to address the inequities that is going on historically in the state of Pennsylvania. We have the disparity study now. So these are all things that, and thanks to you and others, have worked on throughout the years with regards to the disparity study. And we've been at the table as a coalition. You know how we do, kicking doors in.
Right.
And so now we're here, but the foundation is there. Now we need the implementation with regards to making sure that these state agencies truly live up to what the results of the disparity study states, which is Black businesses need more access to those public dollars.
Yeah, I think this is an ongoing battle because even now we're working with a couple of Republicans to try to capture the essence of the best practice that we're learning from states like Maryland, plus some of the things that are happening in different departments. But the question becomes every time we try to do specific remedies for a group of business owners that are Black and brown, we end up having to expand the circle of the pie. And not that it's not warranted, but I know the new thing now is to also include gay, lesbian, transgender folk in the definition of disadvantage. We went a couple years ago, as you know, and expanded it to veterans. We're now talking about those who have disabilities, and it's not that those folks shouldn't be included. Is that when you're really trying to help a group that we know historically has been disadvantaged, you have to be intentional about making sure you lift them up. So how you track that, how you invest in it. And that's been a new conversation inside of these quarters now is how do we make sure the efforts go to those, I'm going to be very specific, Black business owners who typically are last on all of the indicators, right? And so how do you make that happen? How do you support them? And how do you get them capital when they need it and how they need it and not make it so difficult for them to access it?
Right. And that's what it is. So to your point, I could see if the pie was expanded while you were adding additional participants, but the piece of the pie just remains the same, and you're adding additional participants, a lot of which were not historically discriminated against solely on the fact of the color of their skin. And then there were not laws that backed that up. Then there was not further. So we can go, Jim Crow and such as, we can do all of that.
Yeah.
The bottom line is everybody knows what we're talking about with regards to how Black people, Black businesses in general were specifically targeted for exclusion. Now it's time for us to be specifically targeted for inclusion. So I'm thankful that you're at the table, continue to have that discussion, push that fight. And our last but not least, we definitely want to touch on when we talk about making things right, critical race theory. There's a large push, and from my perspective, dealing with the critical race theory is no more than those who are opponents to it. And I won't say specifically Republicans, I won't say specifically white people, but anybody opposed to it. They are snatching the message, snatching the narrative, and they're throwing it out there in terms of propaganda. Talk to me about what you see coming down the pipe in terms of not misinformation, but being a product of a historically Black university, college and university. We know that we need to be taught the truth about how we got to where we are, meaning the successes, the overcoming, the perseverance. And part of that is talking about who tried to prevent that success or the ideals of living out the American dream. And from my perspective, that's what critical race theory entails.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a step back, and first of all, I'm a proud veteran of the United States Marine. I've served in the first Persian Gulf War. I've sacrificed, actually lost capacity in my lung fighting for this country. As you said, I'm a graduate of North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Aggie pride.
Exactly. And I'm very prideful of my experiences. And I hold true when I say I'm American, but I'm a particular type of American. I'm a Black male in America. And so the history and the experiences are very much different for me than others that have come to this place. And critical race theory in Harrisburg right now, we have a couple of Republicans who have initiated a bill to not allow for this critical race theory to be taught in our schools and our universities. similar to what you're seeing in other parts of the country. And one of my challenges to these folk is to ask them why you're so afraid of having a conversation, because really the theory is really predicated on having a conversation and an analysis of how race has been played or impacts our policies, our governmental structures, and our systems. Because ultimately, that's what we have to get to. For some people, they want to hide from our history.
Right.
Critical race theory, in the way I interpret it, it says, look, we're going to embrace the history of this country. We're going to embrace it and look through the lenses of those people who were victimized. Right. Like right now, we're looking through the lenses of the people or the descendants of the people who were the ones victimizing. You know what I'm saying? Right. But we want to flip it on the head.
And we laugh for the sake of not crying. Right?
Yeah, because we keep spinning our wheels and wondering why every indicator, every social economic indicator has a group of people who just continuously shows up at the bottom. And we some people like to say it's because they don't work hard, or it's because they're not trying, or whatever. But it's not that. Right. It's that these systems have never been evaluated from their perspective. Right. The formation of these systems were done intentionally to keep them from being able to advance through. And so I think that's the real essence. It's really people not wanting to own up to the history. Right. They feel like, and I want to disagree with some people. They say critical race theory teaches white kids that they somehow are problematic. It really doesn't say that It says anyone who doesn't work every day to be anti-race. I mean, even a black person, if you're not working every day to evaluate, to train systems, to really focus on it, then you are part of the problem, right? It's not that you're a racist. It's just you're part of the problem. And I think that's we have to learn about their history. They never have to learn about our history, but our history and theirs are one and the same. And we need to tell that story, and we need to educate ourselves and have that discussion.
So how do you unpack that, Dr. Anderson?
Well, to be honest with you, critical race theory is a very complex topic. It has roots in, it used to be, you have roots in the legal arena, where early researchers really looked at the role that race played in sentencing. And this goes back to the 60s and the 70s. Around in the late 80s and mid 90s, it's been transformed and transitioned by critical race theory in education. Gloria Lasting-Billings and William F. Tate at the time really kind of put a seminal work on there, along with other scholars that really kind of talked about this. But as an academic, I think that what folks are talking about now is not critical race theory. They have no concept of what critical race theory is. But I think, just to really kind of make it kind of plain for folks, is just that critical race theory is bigger than just than teaching Black history. And so a lot of times what folks are saying, they're just pushing back on, hey, well, what messages are actually being sent and being taught in the classroom and curricula and things of that nature. Like there's a topic or a class called critical race theory. That's not the case. At its essence, critical race theory really kind of talks about the role that race plays in life in American society. And then you really pretty much can kind of take snippets and pieces of American history or pieces of the American experience and say that if you're of color, your experience is markedly different. And how do we go ahead and unpack that? So I would encourage, Representative Wheatley and everyone else is just to really, push back when legislation kind of comes through, but really have conversations about and really dig down and get to the issue about what exactly is the alternative. And I think we have to really talk about, it's not about critical race theory. It's just about quality education. How do we make sure that students that are in Harrisburg, get the same quality education as students in the surrounding counties? And how do students in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh and all these urbanized areas, how do we ensure that they have equal opportunities, both education, economic, access to job and job training? That at the end of the day, that's what it is. So I tell the listeners, don't fall for the okie doke. Don't get caught up in the semantics of what's going on, and really boil it down to everybody wants to participate in the American dream. meaning folks want to go to work, want to provide for their family, want to be able to send their kids out and know that they're going to come home safe and in one piece. And if we keep that at the center of our conversations, I think we'll get a little bit more traction than getting caught up in semantics of these abstract, pretty complex, legal and academic topics that the layperson is really trying to explain, and they're doing a horrible job of it.
I appreciate that very much. Well, we're ready to wind down. I want to give Representative Wheatley closing thoughts in terms of, is there something that we should be pushing here from our platform to make sure that what's going on down on the Hill is further projected in terms of what can we be helpful with as that you all are working on down there that's going to ultimately benefit and impact all of us throughout the state?
Well, one, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Again, thank you for the platform. I think what you're doing now is vitally important. I mean, part of creating civically engaged citizens is to make sure they have the right information to be engaged and to know how to engage. As it relates to them being more active, or you all being more active, I think part of it is staying connected to Harrisburg or the capital. I'm always a believer that like you're having this discussion around critical race theory. Why not invite the sponsors of the bill,
right, that's
to come talk to about why from their perspective? Because I think something that the doc said I think was important. I think this really gives us an opportunity to have a real conversation, right? Well, what is it that you think is so damaging about this theory? And maybe Doc is right. Maybe they're not clear on what it does. I've never known in an educated society any concept that we couldn't discuss and debate that you have to kind of take it off the record. I thought
Right.
education was about engagement.
Exactly.
You don't have to always believe everything that's being in front of you, but we should be able to engage it. So anyway, long story short, I think continue to engage and outreach to our citizens, educate them, get them involved in the way that politics is happening around them, policies are happening around them, because government is for us.
Right.
It's not a separate entity.
Right.
We are the government.
There you go. And on that note, I'd like to thank both of our guests here. Dr. Anderson, of course, always appreciated.
Always a pleasure.
You're a friend and family of the show. And of course, Representative Wheatley is your first, but definitely not last time here.
Thank you.
So thank you to all of our viewers here on Facebook as well as on YouTube. We look forward to continuing this dialogue and discussion as we move forward. At the direction of Representative Wheatley, we will be reaching out to those that are opposed to critical race theory and others. Senator DeSanto was on the show. We will certainly bring him back on. Representative Kim, I'm sure, will be available as well. So we also have had Representative Donna Bullock, who heads up the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus, here on the show multiple times. So we look forward to continuing this robust conversation. Thank you again for joining us here at Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton. Always a shout out to the control room, the Lewis brothers, and Chad Scott. See you next time. Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton, here in Music Man Multimedia Studios. Once again, as you know, we are in the business of bringing decision makers and those with connections to them to a seat at the table so that we can ensure that available resources are matched with needs of our community here in Harrisburg, Central Pennsylvania, and throughout the state, eventually throughout the nation as we continue to progress and on to being global. So again, a friend of the show, no stranger, we have Mr. James Roxbury of Roxbury News. And when you were last here, we had a discussion. It was in the middle of election season campaigning for not only the mayor's race here in the city of Harrisburg and elsewhere, city council, school board, et cetera. In the referendums, yes, which were of uttermost importance as we try to always highlight, it's not only those names and things that are right there out in front, for you to see, but those things that are also on the ballot that we oftentimes as voters overlook. And so those referendum questions were something that was definitely heavy in rotation in terms of discussion. So just want to open it up again, make it organic, keep it organic as we always do. And if there's some things that you'd like to talk about in terms of where we left off last, campaign finance reporting, 24-hour finance reporting, last second big dumps, so forth and so on
Some
in
big
terms
money
of
dumps coming in Harrisburg for this election.
exactly. So
First off, thanks for having me back again, Karl. I appreciate it. And producers out there, thank you very much. Where we left off the last show was at just prior to the mayoral race, May primary. And we did talk about the campaign reports that were filed, and one glaring one that wasn't filed at that point. That was Otto Banks' campaign. Since that time, well, actually, yeah, it was after the election that it was filed. And I'll start off with that. And this is the Committee for Progressive Communities. And we talked about Otto Banks, his funding source, and basically his funding source is almost entirely through a billionaire investor out of Philadelphia, Jeffrey Yaz, listed as the wealthiest person in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And on this report now, we see that he had donated, let's see here, at least $160,000.
he meaning
He meaning Jeffrey Yaz through his Students First PAC. It's a filed PAC. It's Jeffrey Yaz alone who controls his PAC. The PAC makes the donations to Otto Banks' Committee for Better Communities. One thing about this campaign report, it shows you the lack of, when you're running for an office, you tend to try to get grassroots small donations. There are almost no small donations. There were actually only 4 individual donations recorded on this campaign report. And one is a county employee, Ruby Daub, $300. Bruce Nelson, $500. David Taylor, and if it didn't have his address or his job on, and that's one thing, this report, there's some glaring problems with this report about what is not listed on this report as required by the Commonwealth. Generally, any donation over $250 has to list what the person's name is, their address, what their occupation is. It doesn't say what several of these people's occupations are. And David Taylor is one of the principals of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. If it's the same David Taylor, it doesn't say what his occupation is. So we're guessing because information is lacking from this campaign. The last one was Burton Morris at $500, and that totals $2,300. On the campaign report, it states that there was $188,112. Jeffrey Yaz's Students First PAC brought in $160. These 4 individuals brought in another $2,300. There's $25,000 missing on this report. It doesn't say where it came in, and it's not saying where it goes out. Looking through this, the majority of money that was spent on this campaign was for digital billboards.
So when you say the majority of the money, approximately how much?
I didn't go
Digital
through.
Okay, no, that's
let's
fine.
say tens of thousands of dollars for digital billboards.
And these are all
signs.
things that are for the public, that are out there. The campaign finance reports,
They do, and it is those
Dauphin
things.
County.
Those things are listed here.
Okay.
I will say that it's the campaign person submitting the report, Anwar Curtis.
Anwar. Okay, I gotcha.
Anwar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anwar Curtis. Okay.
And it appears that he actually has to pay the late filing fee, which is $150.
Right. Okay.
But he was also listed as a consultant and did receive funds through the campaign. So I'm not sure if it washed through there or not. But it's kind of glaring. And also, too, in this campaign report, you have expenditures, and it's under Part D of the campaign report. On the front page, it says that the expenditures, as a summary, were $110,000, $66,000. It says that on the report, the ending balance is $78,000. So how much of that $78,000 was spent during the actual day of the election, walking around money, paying for your campaign staff? But under that expenditures, if you look at page D, which I'll pull up here, it's basically blank. Part E, Part D, here it is. Oh, no, I'm sorry, all other contributors. And that lists, again, to the $28,000 that isn't showing up here. So it only has the 4.
So you're saying there's a relationship between the 28,000 and the blank Part D?
There should be a lot more information on this
Part
report.
D.
I did talk to an election attorney, and that person said that you can actually file a complaint with the Department of State
Mhm.
and they could actually audit this campaign expenditure,
Mm.
whether or not will happen, because obviously we know that auto banks lost.
Right.
And we went through the campaign as we met
And this
last
is not,
time.
yeah. And so, one of the reasons why I wanted you back on was because we had this conversation about, campaign finance reporting during the election season, and there was only one not filed, and it was this one that was not filed.
And it's
so
a
we're
tremendous amount of money, and
Yeah.
there are still problems with this, with information
question.
isn't provided, and it does lead to the major funder for this campaign is the single richest person in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's a big deal.
Who I would say, quite frankly, pushes agendas that is not necessarily friendly to urban environments.
Yes,
It's
charter schools,
particularly,
cyber schools.
and I always say, now I'm a charter school
Right.
proponent, so I always delineate that by saying public brick and mortar charter schools is what I'm in favor of.
Okay.
Now, in the private, the cyber schools, the non brick and mortar, I'm not in support of.
Okay.
I'm in support of public brick and mortar charter schools, and that's it. So whether it was Ronald H. Brown, whether it was Sylvan Heights Science Charter School and or Premier Arts and Science Charter School, those are the types of charter schools I'm in support of. And I'm talking
Which
locally,
are physically buildings
physical
that
buildings with students walking into,
right.
teachers walking into, administrators walking into, and not something mystical. I'll say that. So, but my point in saying that is what happens to those of us who clearly understands the difference or the benefits of a public charter school, and as we'll say, a traditional school, meaning traditional school districts like a Foose, like a Downey, like a Steele,
right.
Hamilton, whoever, right. Hamilton. Yeah, Hamilton's not even traditional anymore because
that went. After we fixed up the building, we sold it, right?
Exactly, and so that's alternative
Under
school.
That's from.
Here we go.
The legacy, right?
Exactly.
There we go. Left us with that lawsuit.
Keeps on giving.
He walked away with $2.3 million in a settlement. His attorney Cohen walked away with, I think, $700,000 out of that 2.3.
Easily.
And it wasn't the first time that's happened.
Exactly.
Not in this state. Another state it happened.
Definitely not in this city.
We should have learned our lesson once, but anyway.
But I'm saying that to say we started off with that campaign finance report. The issue that I have is not necessarily having options for students, and I'm talking about going back to the Jeffrey Yaz or the auto banks, but more importantly, that Senate Bill 1 and that school choice label, you can't lump everything under school choice,
right?
Because it's not fair. It is not truthful, because school choice putting public money into private schools on its face is illegal, because you can't take public money, put it in private schools where they can discriminate based on IEPs, based on religion. I would even say, even the Bishop McDevitt, for example,
whether you're vaccinated or not,
or even now whether you're vaccinated or not, or with Bishop McDevitt, whether or not you're Catholic or not, whether or not you pay this tuition or that tuition. Right. So there's discriminatory things that are right there that aren't necessarily no, you can't come, but there's a price to pay if you're not this.
Well, if you can pick and choose the best and the brightest students and the best athletes and only those, or poach athletes away from other schools, and then you end up with championship teams. And we're a pretty big Commonwealth. We have, I know there's a couple football players just signed with Dallas from here. I know there's a couple great basketball players. And is that fair to the brick and mortar schools?
Right, and that's why I say school choice. Right, it's like saying black males.
Right.
I'm a black male. I'm Clarence Thomas, Ben Carson, but we're different. Trust and believe. I'm different than the two of them. So I'm saying that to say school choice, where funding comes from, why funding is coming in such enormous numbers around urban areas. We meaning the communities, we have to, especially black communities, we have to pay particular attention to why people are willing to come in and help all of a sudden.
The amount of money per student.
Exactly.
It's absolutely astounding.
Exactly.
And we're looking at what you said, Senate Bill 1.
Yes.
You have Senator Martin, ETIC credits coming again, and now they're looking at, I think, a value of almost $1 billion over the next few years. I haven't been paying attention to that because we're trying to stay with the voting and election and census and redistricting. So I can't cover everything.
Exactly, that redistricting, that ETIC. I'm in favor, quite honestly, in all fairness, in terms of if you are a private school that is still doing good work, and like Nativity Boys School.
Right.
I believe that tax credit should be, increased if it's going to help those type of entities, thrive and continue to provide a quality service in terms of education, of certain populations of kids who
Community's been very
benefit in those
successful, too.
environments.
I remember
Agreed.
touring that when Lyndon Thompson was mayor.
Yeah, right. So with those types of benefits, I think they still should have access to funding and resources as well. The issue is when you commingle, talking about public, dollars going into private schools. I disagree with that, and I'm not in support of that. But back to the campaign that was just passed. Congratulations to Ms. Wanda Williams, of course. She is the new mayoral elect. As I said to plenty of people, that is not who I was for. However, of the two remaining, I could live with Ms. Wanda more than I could live with the other two being elected, and I stand by that. Not that I have anything against them as people, but in terms of as leaders, definitely was not in support of either one of those camps. And now, hopefully, they're still as adamant and interested in this community doing well as they were when they were candidates. And so I would like to see them, continue that fight. One thing I did, even after losing various elections here in the city, is I stayed committed to the community, the goals, and those things that I ran on in terms of an agenda. So consistency, those of you who were in this last race, who were not quote unquote victorious, you can still be victorious in this community by showing consistency, which is continuing to push the platform that you were pushing when you wanted the position as a common citizen. And so I would offer that bit of advice from someone who wasn't as successful at obtaining an office, but never gave up on the community. So with that being said, why don't we talk about other campaign finance reports? So it's not just as if we're talking about autos. If you have that information, because we know with regards to, or wherever.
Well, we did go through at the last show, and but it was a tremendous amount of money that was spent. Shankwaller spent over $300,000. We have Auto Banks at $188,000. Papin Foos, I forget what his totals were, but we know that 24-hour reports, there was at least $50,000 dumped just days before the election. Mm-hmm. We know that the results of the election, Wanda wins by, I think, 56 votes. Mm-hmm. Papin Foos in second, Shankwaller in third, Otto in fourth. And I think we talked about this before. I know we brought it up looking back in the previous elections when Louis Butts ran and got 60-some votes. In this case, you had Knox, who got 62 votes. Mm-hmm. So the difference of one additional candidate, right? His vote total, 62, right, was the difference between first and second. We talked about that, how close this race could possibly be. Right. As far as Wanda winning the race, I was able to get up to her campaign victory post later that night, and I was able to ask a question, and my question was focused on city council. Mm-hmm. Early in the day, luckily I ran into Westmore Majors, and Wes said that he was interested in running for president of council. Mm-hmm. When I asked Wanda, what would she get involved with, who the next city council president was? And I think her answer was excellent. She said, no, council knows what they're doing. They're going to choose their own person. I'll work with whoever is voted to be president of city council. And on that note, why don't we take a pause there for a commercial break? On the other side of this commercial, we'll talk about what the city of Harrisburg can look like and will look like moving forward with new additions to city council, as well as Mayor-elect Miss Wanda Williams. We'll see you on the other side of this commercial break. All right, so welcome back. Thank you to our viewers and our listeners and viewers who are going to be seeing us later on YouTube. We're here with Mr. James Roxbury, who's going to be a regular on our show as we continue to move forward. He is of Roxbury News, one of the mainstays, one of the consistent news sources that have historically reported on the issues from a factual standpoint since the Steve Reed days, we'll say. So, of course, Mr. Roxbury is always good to... Way back. You started when you were 16, we'll just say that. Yeah, all right, let's say that. We'll say that part. But, yeah, we were talking about the city of Harrisburg politically moving forward now that Ms. Wanda Williams, mayor-elect Ms. Wanda Williams is coming in January. And then with city council having new additions to it, we'll do with the overall governance of the city from the administrative side as well as the legislative branch as we continue to look how we move the community, the city as a whole, the state as a capital city, how we move the state forward as a whole in terms of governing moving forward. So you were sharing with
Ms. Wanda had said to you on election night?
Yeah, luckily I was able to ask her a question about the makeup of city council. Would she get involved in lobbying to who would be the president? Because the mayor has to work with city council. If there's a divide between the mayor and council, progress doesn't happen. I think a good thing of Wanda's career, 16 years on city council, president as city president right now. She'll give up that spot when she's sworn in as mayor. So the makeup of council, we have new members coming in, and if it is Wes as president, then that's somebody who has experience. Wes has been a board member of the Harrisburg Authority. He's been on council for a number of years. He's worked at the Capitol. He's worked as a lobbyist. He has a great background in political entities in the city of Harrisburg. And I think if that's the case, you can see with also too, and you mentioned this, the amount of CARES money coming into the city.
Yeah.
Almost $50 million coming into the city, 40-some million coming into the school district. And what the Republican-controlled House and Senate right now are doing is what will happen with this $7.2 billion that is coming statewide.
Right.
A lot of that money could funnel down into the city. I think it should. If you have a vibrant capital city, you have a vibrant Commonwealth.
Right.
Today, again, running around, there's a lot happening.
I was at the small business press conference earlier today
Yes,
at
they
9
just
o'clock.
came there,
Just
and
came
then
from there.
went to county commissioners, where Mike Priest is voted in as chair of the Dauphin County Commissioners, which is extremely important. Again, working relationship with the mayor, council, and the county is extremely important.
Well, who won vice chair? Who's vice president?
I recorded it.
commissioner?
I'm not even sure if
Okay.
it was Hartwick.
Okay.
It might be Hartwick.
Okay.
Hartwick made the motion.
For chair, for Priest to be chair, he made the
went
motion.
through all of it. He made the motion for Priest to be chair, for the secretary, for the vice
Oh, okay.
chair,
I
and they
see.
were all done at the same time.
Oh, I understand.
Unfortunately, all I did
That's
was
not
record it.
recorded.
I was very intent on making sure, or just capturing if Priest was going to be it. And so what happened was Chad Saylor is sworn in once Jeff Haste gives up his seat, resigned his seat to go into private practice. Chad Saylor, the former clerk, county clerk, he gives up the county clerk position, and Scott Burford was sworn in today as the new county clerk. Scott Burford was the right-to-know officer of the county, so we should be getting, as the county, a new right-to-know officer as well.
I don't want to gloss over that, because I think that is of uttermost importance in terms of what goes on at the county level, and those the county happenings, as we say, especially with. I'm really interested in what former Commissioner Jeff Haste does moving forward. As I recall, he's going into business ventures at the same time that billions are coming to the state.
Yes.
And I'm just one, call it like I see it. And I'm not accusing him or anything, but I'm just simply saying I'm very much interested in him taking his show on the road from the county commissioner's perspective to quote unquote private practice.
Is he going to be a lobbyist? Is he going to be a
Right.
consultant? Will he
Right.
register as a lobbyist?
Right.
Is he going to work under a law firm? I think it's been mentioned, McNeese, Wallace, and Norrick,
Okay.
which is an umbrella, the law firm which has Mike Musser and his company within their, I think, ownership or total ownership interest.
Right, and that's key. Because we believe those names that run the county and run the gaming
Mike
dollars.
Musser with gaming money, right?
Yeah.
At least $10 to $12 million a year from gaming money. The hotel tax money, which is absolutely now, we had the pandemic, which put a major hit on it. Hotel rooms are coming back strong.
But there's recovery too. So there was a major hit put on that money,
Yes,
but there's golden parachutes as well that's
There
been
is a
come through the
lot of
CARES Act money,
in
the
the city of
American Rescue
Harrisburg.
Plan money.
Yes.
So those gaps,
Maybe more than ever
right, and those
in our
gaps,
history.
correct. And so those gaps that the pandemic created, it's not as if the pandemic isn't doing anything on the other side to close those gaps. In fact, not only fill them, but they're overflowing in a lot of those
They are.
areas. So
We'll see how that works out and what the relationship between the county and Jeff Haste is. Now, he
Right.
does have a very vast experience. He was a representative. He was the county clerk. He was a commissioner, and now lobbyist or consultant. But
So was Steve Reed.
yeah,
He was state
all right.
rep. He was. I'm just saying, right?
You're right. Yes,
I
you're
mean,
right.
we
And
do a
that's
little-
what- yes.
I know I'm a Harrisburg High graduate. I do a little bit of research here and there.
Yes, again, Reed's tenure went from being a representative to being the county commissioner to being the mayor, and he was running for multiple offices at the same time.
Right.
So it wasn't just 28 years as the mayor. There was
Right.
years as a county commissioner and years as a representative.
Shout out to Bishop McDevitt.
Anyway, Let's move on here. Is that one thing about the campaign reporting is that there's still reports. We just have now the 30-day post-primary,
Right.
and those reports, the end of the period ended June 7th, and the final reporting day will be June 17th.
Right.
On that day or close to that, we hope that all campaigns file the reports on a timely manner, and we'll see how much money was spent on election day at that point.
Right.
We should see detailed expenses of the so-called volunteers that were working the polls. And in a lot of cases, people were volunteering. I know
Right.
Wanda only spent something like $30,000. Shankweiler spent 10 times that much. Between
Right.
Papenfuss and Otto Banks and Shankweiler, it might have been 15 to 20 times the amount.
Right.
So that'll be telling in itself. So that'll be the last phase of the post-primary.
Okay.
And then what we'll have is Wanda being sworn in January, and then you'll have city council reorganization,
Right.
where they will pick their leadership makeup. And at that point, we'll know how the city is going to move, looking at the president of council, vice president of council, and how they're going to, and also new city solicitor, I'm
That's
guessing.
well, it could be.
I would think so. This is a change of administration.
Right.
I think you'll see a lot of people, and hopefully Wanda takes a lot of time and effort. And you know how difficult it is, Director of Public Works,
Yeah.
Director of Parks and Recreation. There's a lot under the control of the mayor and council.
Right.
So hopefully they can move forward, and the city will benefit. And I think Wanda will actually be a decent mayor. So
Yeah, I mean,
it might not have been. I'm not a city resident, so I didn't get a chance. But if I could just go through the numbers, Jerry
Sure.
Fieser, the elections head of Dauphin County, did provide the numbers of the amount of people voted in this primary. So if I can go through those real
sure,
quick.
please do.
Total primary figures for registered voters in Dauphin County are 190,316. Of those, 54,308 voted in this primary. While
Repeat that. 190, 316.
Yes, and 54,000 right.
voted.
And this was a high turnout.
Was that 54,000 even or 54,000?
54,308 people.
Okay. So be it that on record.
Out of that, 28, and this is the problem of the Democratic Party in Dauphin County, which the Democratic Party registration is, I believe, 7,000 or 8,000 more than Republicans. So it isn't that there are more registered Republicans.
I get
it's
it.
not. So it's almost like the home team advantage is the Democrats, and yet the percentage of Democrats that voted in this primary were 28.6%. The Republican turnout, the total percentage of people that voted was 28.6%,
Right.
and that number's high for primaries.
Right.
Out of that,
Non-presidential.
non-presidential, out of that, 27.8% were Democrats, and the Republicans were 36.5%. That is the difference.
Yeah.
The problem of getting Democrats elected is the Republicans turn out at a much higher percent.
Now, because that was those are primary numbers.
Yes.
Correct. So we know this Pennsylvania's closed primary. So
That's a good point. Let me bring up one last one. There were 10.2% of other voters. Those are people that were not Republicans or Democrats that would not have voted in a closed primary except for the amendments, the questions on the ballot, the referendums. So that's extremely important. I'm glad you brought that up because there was another 10%
That's
of
out
this
there,
190. Now that's included in the total figure of 28.6% that voted. But
Okay.
it's still a large majority. It's a large part. It's a minority.
Right.
But it's still 10%.
right.
So if you look at, if the Democrats would first off just get their people to vote to begin with, and then go to these other parties, and it could be the Green Party, independent parties, any other party that's not a major party,
Right.
that would be locked out in a normal primary if there were no referendum questions.
Right.
They were able to vote. They weren't able to vote or write in people. They were able to vote on only the referendum questions.
Right.
We
Agreed.
did talk about the referendum questions. The first two were extremely important, and I think this is the
Yeah.
new plan for the Republicans. If they can't get bills
Pass
to-
over because they know they have the turnout.
the veto, yes.
Yep.
What they are doing is backdooring this by putting these on the ballot. And they got two questions on the ballot, and that was the emergency powers from the governor,
Yep.
and then the 21-day time period for COVID emergency, which is turning out to be, it's a cluster right now. Even today, they're in right now in the session, because one of the things they did with this, in cases, both question 1 and question 2 did pass almost exactly 52% to 48%.
which shows that the Democrat divide and the Republican.
Well, also in this is a little different in that you had a lot of conservative entities
And
pushing
10%.
to vote yes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You had nobody pushing back.
Right.
The Democrats didn't create a PAC, which they could have,
right.
or a fund to say, we need to really back up the governor here, who is a Democrat and who has been endorsing Democrats.
Well, I get in trouble a lot of times with Dauphin County Democratic Committee because I talk about how Republican money runs the Dauphin County Democratic Committee. I say it.
They do it very well, and they do it very cheap,
I know.
too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they vote for us. I'm just simply saying they fund things that happen. And I know it. In a Democratic run city, in a Democratic, I mean, hell, look at the county commissioners.
Right.
They have a majority.
They have had a majority for almost 250 years.
Exactly.
We haven't had any row officers, no prothonotary, coroner, a recorder of deeds. When you look at these row officers, Offense Court, how is this possible that when you have such a high voter edge, and yet you lose every
And I go
election?
back to, and I think Rajette Harris is doing a great job with regards to the hand she's been dealt.
Okay.
But the historical hand of quote unquote leadership in the Dauphin County Democratic Committee has not been something to write home to about, and that has been, I've seen with my own eyes in the meeting where a Republican judge or a Republican period was running for office and got a chance to have the mic at a Dauphin County Democratic Committee.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, but I've yet to see a Democrat
get the mic
at a Republican county meeting or anything.
Jeff Engel is a perfect
or
example.
hell, an invite.
Jeff Engel is a Republican. He's part of the Republican machine. He cross-filed as a Democrat, and he is going to win the election because he won the Democrat spot and the Republican spot.
Exactly, and so
that doesn't happen with the Democrat
it's
winning
not a
the
reverse.
Republican spot.
Right. And so we talk about black businesses and stuff, and we and I know this might be off a bit, but people are talking all the time about why don't we have an anti-lynching bill? United States wide, nationally, but the Asian population got a bill passed just like that when they put up with only maybe 6 months of hell during the pandemic. Well, it's because same reason why we go to Asian stores even though we're mistreated, and there's black stores out there. They have clout, and have that clout that they have is us. But when it's time to be reciprocated, it's not there. And so it's not saying be anti anybody. It's just saying be more conscientious of being pro-black and pro-Democrat when it counts. So that's a long way around getting to your piece about the down ballot elections, the importance of the non-voters, as well as how important those referendums are in terms of backdooring a process that is supposed to be upfront, laid out in terms of voting, in terms of governance between the governor in the legislature, House and Senate. So.
And we're gonna continue to see that. We have threats now from Republican members of the House and Senate for anti-vaccine purposes, for not getting labeled with the vaccine passport that Wolf said he doesn't want to enact to begin with. So they're fighting over something.
And the governor
said, I'm not doing that.
Right. We won't even talk about critical race theory, which is really teaching Black History Month, which we're teaching anyway, but we don't want white people to feel bad.
They have said that. I've recorded it at rallies just last week. It was Russ Diamond that said that. I think his words were that white children shouldn't be told they're inferior because of what happened a couple hundred years ago. It has nothing to do with what's being taught, but yet that's the talking point, and their audience is eating it up, and they're going to turn out the polls. And what's happening is also what he is.
There's going to be some pushback, especially starting here.
Well, what they're saying is run for the committee seats, run for the lowest down ballot
school board members. If you are listening, clearly understand this: if Black children are old enough to experience racism, white children are old enough to learn about it. And that's not critical race theory. That is just Common Core education.
I missed the whole Tulsa thing in high school. Went to McDevitt.
Hell, newsflash. Newsflash, so did I. And I went to Harrisburg High down the street. Right. Up the street. So
I want to learn history.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is, history. Good, bad, and different. Right. I want to learn history.
Tell me what part of American history that we learn is really good. I mean, you can't have the Constitution without talking about slavery. You can't have
We
civil
really didn't
rights.
talk about that too much at all either.
But that's,
We
we
didn't
didn't.
know.
We didn't talk about the bad parts. But I'm saying,
Right.
tell me what part of
Did
the
it take a
Constitution.
musical Hamilton put together by Latino people that written and directed with people of color? Now the movie's out, directed by an Asian director, and it's getting phenomenal reviews. It's going to be a monster hit.
Yeah.
Why did this take so
Shout
long?
out to Spike Lee wanting to do it but couldn't.
Funding sources. He's even with his assets, it's still hard to make major movies.
Hey.
Um,
Yeah. But I know we got to wind down. I know you have
We're
another.
definitely getting sidetracked, but let's if we can sort of end with this is that
Okay.
talking about the amendment process, these referendums. Very important. On Monday morning in the State Government Committee, chaired by Seth Grove, there was a bill that was moved forward. It's House Bill 1300, and this is about voting rights.
Yes.
And this is a change to the voting rights, about drop boxes, having people oversee. They can volunteer and be inside the elections and make complaints at their free will. There are some good things in this bill. There's no question about that. But I think the bill is 145 pages, and when they read the summary, it took like 17 minutes just to read the summary. So we're going to have to look through there, piece it out, see what is good, what is bad. Now, that's a House bill that is going to go through the House and Senate and then to Wolf's desk.
Right.
If he vetoes it, that's on him. I'm sure there could be other amendments added to it. But something else happened that morning, and that was Martina White's bill. That was HB 822.
822.
And HB 822 is another referendum. So this is intent to bypass the governor's office. And what this bill started out, it's a recall bill, sort of on the lines of California, where they're actively now with their signatures to recall Governor Newsom.
Okay.
This bill was worded along the same lines,
Okay.
and it called for a 25% of the people voting in an election, let's say for the governor. If that many people signed a petition, then they could start the recall process. Having this be a constitutional amendment, it has to go through 2 sessions of House and Senate. So it's starting right now in 2021. It would have to go through both houses, Senate and House, this year, be reintroduced next year in 2022, approved twice, and then be put on the ballot. However, the amendment that came through from Frank Ryan out of Lebanon County, and this was done at the absolute last moment, that I still don't even know what is in this amendment, and I tried to talk to Martina White today. She had a meeting to get to it. She will talk with me.
Okay.
I have no problem with that. I just caught her at a bad time. She's going into leadership meeting.
Okay.
I'm going to go back today
Right.
once we finish this, and hopefully I can ask her some questions about this. The amendment changed this specifically to a Class 1 city. We only have one Class 1
Philadelphia.
city, Philadelphia. And it relates to the mayor's office and the DA's office. And the
That
DA of
is
Philadelphia
specific.
is Larry Krasner. Larry Krasner just beat a Republican who changed to a Democrat, sort of like Shankweiler, and endorsed by the FOP.
We can't leave Shankweiler out there by himself. Somebody else did that as well.
Yes, and Krasner won with 65% of the vote. So because of that, now he does have a Republican opponent coming up, the defense attorney Perudo, I think his name is, and
Not to be confused with Perdue.
Perudo, the mayor of
There's a
Pittsburgh,
former
who
mayor
lost the
now.
election, taken out by
Shout out
progressives.
Ed Gainey.
Ed Gainey, Summer Lee,
Brett Gainey.
Emirado, all the people that worked
Jake
out
Wheatley.
Benham, right, that pulled together and knocked out a 2-term mayor, which is a big deal.
Yeah. Especially in Pittsburgh.
It is, and Gainey's
Shout out to Uncle Frank out there in the Hill District.
Anyway, this bill, as amended, it just came out of State Government Committee. I think it's going to Rules Committee in the House. It'll move to the Senate. But something like this is extremely dangerous. If you have a very progressive DA, one of the most progressive in the United States, who just got reelected, who the establishment does not want. They have gone on record time and time again. Also, Frontline has the series Philly DA.
Yes.
I've watched the first 8 episodes so far. I think it's fascinating. And because they can't take them out in an election, they're putting it on a referendum.
Right.
And the question that I want to ask Rep. White is this a statewide referendum then?
That's
If
right.
It's
If it's in
specifically to
Class
the
1s,
DA,
yeah.
but does everybody in Philly vote for him? Or does
Right.
everybody in Pennsylvania vote?
Harrisburg,
I don't know that.
York, Lancaster,
And also, too, is that
Philadelphia.
you think about if Krasner got, I think, 65% of the vote, he crushed his opponent. But
Right.
is this a way to backdoor to give them another chance Even
Another bite at the
with-
apple.
at Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
To say we can't beat them in the elections, but we'll beat them by going a backdoor constitutional amendment,
Right.
and that way we can bypass the governor.
Right.
Also, I have to say this is that Wolf's term is up next year.
Right.
Are the Republicans so paranoid and so worried that they are going to lose
Another.
and have Josh Shapiro win the governorship and have a Democratic governor for the next 8 years? And is this why they are taking these procedures?
One thing I'll give the Republicans, and I'm not a Republican, but shout out to the Republicans on this. They playing their asses off in preparation. They're 12 years out.
8 o'clock in the morning is when this committee took place on state government, and every single Republican committee person on that board was there.
Exactly.
If they don't show up, they're not going to be on the committees.
Exactly.
Brian
it's-
Sims didn't even show up. He's
Yeah.
running for lieutenant governor. He didn't show up at the committee. He voted no by proxy. But you're telling me this is how the Republicans win.
Yeah.
If you're on Darrell Metcalf, who runs the environmental committee,
Right.
if you're on his committee and if you miss and don't show up at his committee, you're not going to last on his committee.
Right.
You're off. You have to
Right.
be there in person.
Right.
Snow, rain, sleet, hail, you better show up.
And let me just, we can end with this. I want to talk specifically, real quickly, about city council again. We can't underestimate Asha Green and Danielle Bowers in terms of council president.
Oh, I didn't say that it was.
No, it's not. No. I'm just saying. Just a thought burned into my
Asha
mind.
is a seat.
Yeah.
She won re-election,
Yes,
so
exactly.
she's been on council.
Yeah,
She knows how it's
yeah.
worked. And then Bowers is new.
Yeah. Well, she's not that new. I mean, she's.
Well, I mean, this is
connected-
just
yeah.
first term on
right,
council.
Right.
And it's 7
But you figure
members.
she's state government in terms of she's executive director up at tourism with the state house. You know,
Okay.
on the D side.
Right.
Spelman grad. So
Well, but
family
The good
ties,
thing is
everything.
we've got
It's
some good
good.
people on council.
And that's what I was going to say. So
And if it's not Wes, who I know Wes,
Mhm.
and that's why I just said that. And luckily, I ran
Oh,
into
no,
him, so I hadn't had a chance to talk to the other members. But
Yeah.
I think that the city.
But I think the city
is
will
in good
end with
shape.
this. Is the city is definitely, in a good shape, coming off of a solid foundation, in terms of budget, in terms of where we need it to be.
credit rating.
Credit rating. We can borrow again. The monies that are coming back into the city, specifically to the city, not even talking about the county and the school board and the school district, but into the city. And as I understand it, at least 20+ million has already arrived into the city budget. And so there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and thankfully this time it's not a train. So on that note, we'll sign off. And of
One
course,
last thing.
go.
Go. You want to do it under over how many times President Biden comes into Harrisburg next year?
Oh, hands down. Why don't we say? I'm thinking the minimum of 8.
It's a tough bet. All right, what's the under over on that one? 5, 6? And Vice President Harris?
No, she's gonna be here more than 8.
Yes.
She'll be here more than 8. I'm taking
Yes.
12 to 14
Okay.
with her.
And
Honestly,
Senator Casey?
he's gonna show up every time she
Every
shows
time,
up.
right.
She'll show up. He'll show up every
So
time.
think about that.
Yeah.
Think about the photos of Wanda Williams posing with the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States. I mean,
Heavy.
Harrisburg is on the map.
Heavily.
It
Heavily.
is on the map, and I forget what was The Hill or another publication in D.C. yesterday put out that we are the swing state. This
Hands
is
down. Hands
by
down.
far the most
Hands down.
important. The
Pennsylvania.
Senate race coming up,
Yep.
the gubernatorial race coming up. All these races are happening right in the city, in the state. These referendums.
Capital City. I was just gonna say the referendums.
Capital City, right.
Capital City.
That's
We
it.
are again, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Mayor Elect Ed Gainey in Pittsburgh and everything that's going on out there in Philly.
We the capital city.
We are the capital city, and as we say on my other hat, as the president and a founder member of the Pennsylvania Diversity Coalition, when those dollars come from the feds and come to the Commonwealth, traditionally they do the Y in terms of going to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Our focus as the Diversity Coalition here at Music Man Multimedia Studios and other connections that we have that look out for Harrisburg is to make sure that Y is turned into an I and everything runs through the capital city. So shout out to Harrisburg, Central Pennsylvania as a whole in terms of being the mecca of what helps the Commonwealth run. So on that note, I'll thank you again for coming in. It's
Thank
a
you,
pleasure.
Ron.
And we'll see you on the next time. See you on the next episode of A Seat at the Table, hosted by Karl Singleton, live from Music Man Multimedia Studios.